Caleb didn't even look at me. He was too busy admiring his own reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting his silk tie with the precision of a man who thought he was the center of the universe. He didn't turn around when he delivered the sentence that effectively ended our marriage. "Harper, honestly, don't come," he said, his voice dripping with that familiar, patronizing warmth. "It's the Sky Garden Gala. It is high-level networking. You wouldn't understand the industry talk. And frankly, you would just be bored sitting there in silence while the adults speak." He checked his watch, grabbed his jacket, and walked out the door without a backward glance. He thought he was leaving behind a compliant, boring housewife who would stay home and fold laundry. He had no idea he had just insulted his new boss. "Stop right there. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever had a partner make you feel small just to make themselves feel big? I want to know I'm not the only one reading this." The front door clicked shut, and the sound echoed through the hallway like a judge's gavel. In any other version of this story, this is the part where I would have collapsed onto the entryway bench. I would have spiraled, wondering why my husband didn't value me, or if I should have worn a tighter dress. I would have texted my sister to ask if I was being unreasonable, but I didn't do any of that. I didn't chase his taillights down the driveway. My pulse didn't even spike. Instead, a strange cold clarity washed over me. It felt like walking out of a humid room into a meat locker. The heat of the argument was gone, replaced by a preservation instinct that was purely clinical. I walked up the stairs, my steps steady and quiet. I went straight to our walk-in closet. I bypassed the section Caleb approved of the soft beige cardigans, the sensible denim, the floral sundresses that made me look non-threatening and sweet. He liked me in pastels. He said they made me look approachable. I realize now that approachable was just his code word for submissive. I reached for the back of the closet, unzipping a heavy garment bag I had brought home 3 days ago. Inside wasn't a floral dress. It was a suit. It was a black tuxedo, tailored to within an inch of its life. Sharp satin lapels, a plunging neckline that required zero jewelry, and trousers that fell in a perfect, razor-straight line. It was aggressive. It was the kind of outfit you don't wear to support your husband. It's the kind you wear to bury him. I stripped off the loungewear, the uniform of the boring wife, and stepped into the armor. As I buttoned the jacket, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back wasn't Harper the housewife. She wasn't the plus one who needed things explained to her. She was Harper Vance, the newly appointed vice president of strategic acquisitions for the very conglomerate that signed Caleb's paychecks. I smoothed the lapels. My hands didn't shake. I pulled my phone from my clutch. I didn't call Caleb. I didn't text him to beg for a second chance to be included. I scrolled past his name entirely and tapped a contact saved simply as A. Sterling. Arthur Sterling. The group chairman. The man Caleb was currently terrified of. He picked up on the second ring. "Harper?" Arthur's voice was gravelly and surprised. "I thought you were taking the weekend to settle in before the announcement on Monday. Change of plans." "Arthur," I said. My voice sounded different to my own ears, lower, stripped of the pleasing lilt I used around Caleb. "I'll be at the Sky Garden Gala tonight." There was a brief pause on the line. "Excellent. I'll have security add you to the VIP list. Do you need a +1 for your husband?" "No," I said, staring at my reflection. "He's already there, but he thinks he's there alone." Arthur chuckled, a dry sound. "I see. Shall I send the car?" "Yes." "And Arthur? I'm done with the soft launch. I'm ready to be announced." I hung up the phone. I grabbed my keys, locked the house that my salary paid for, and walked out into the night. Caleb thought he had left his boring wife at home to fold laundry. He had no idea he had just invited the executioner to the party. I stood on the curb, the night air biting against my exposed neck, waiting for the chairman's private car. The silence out here was different than the silence inside the house. Inside, the silence felt heavy, like a debt I couldn't pay off. Out here, under the streetlights, it felt like leverage. I let Caleb's words replay in my head, dissecting them not with emotion, but with the cold precision of a forensic accountant. "You would be bored. You wouldn't understand. He called me boring because I spent my evenings on my laptop instead of listening to him recount his glory days from college. He called me stagnant because I didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to feel important. But as I watched the streetlights flicker, staring at the house my bonus checks had paid the down payment for, I realized the truth. I wasn't boring. I was efficient. For 8 years, I had been the silent architect of Caleb's reality. He walked through life thinking the doors opened for him by magic. He didn't see me oiling the hinges. He didn't see me fixing his credit score when we first met, raising it from a tragic 500 to a respectable 750 so he could lease that car he loved so much. He didn't see me rewriting his resumes, softening his arrogance into confidence, editing his emails to make him sound like the leader he desperately wanted to be. Caleb called me background noise. He didn't realize that background noise is the hum of the engine keeping the plane in the air. I had curated a life where he could feel like the main character. I shrank myself to fit into the negative space of his ego. When I got promoted 2 years ago, I downplayed the title. I told him it was just more paperwork, not that I was managing a budget larger than the GDP of a small country. I did that to protect him. I treated his insecurity like a fragile antique that needed to be kept in a climate-controlled room. That was my mistake. I thought I was being a supportive partner. In reality, I was just a venture capitalist pouring resources into a failing startup. My gaze drifted to the darkened windows of our home. I had handled the mortgage, the investments, the insurance, and the emotional labor. I wasn't just his wife. I was his chief operating officer, his PR firm, and his safety net. And he had the audacity to call the safety net boring just because it caught him every time he fell. A sleek black sedan turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the dark. It wasn't an Uber. It was a Mercedes Maybach, the kind Arthur Sterling sent for people he respected, the kind he sent for equals. The car pulled up to the curb, purring like a large, dangerous cat. The driver stepped out. A man in a sharp uniform who didn't look at me with pity or dismissal. "Miss Vance?" he asked, opening the rear door. I looked at the house one last time. I was leaving the version of Harper, who fixed things behind on the driveway. The Harper getting into this car wasn't going to fix anything. She was going to veto it. "Thank you," I said, sliding into the leather seat. The door closed with a solid, expensive thud, sealing me inside. I leaned back as the car pulled away, watching my neighborhood blur into streaks of light. I wasn't the foundation anymore. Tonight, I was the earthquake. The elevator ride to the 80th floor took 45 seconds. My ears popped twice. When the doors slid open, the sky garden hit me like a physical force. It didn't look like a party. It looked like a movie set for a dystopian future where everyone is rich and nobody has a soul. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, revealing the city grid sprawling miles below. The lighting was a severe, Arctic blue, bouncing off chrome pillars and crystal flutes. The air smelled of ozone, expensive gin, and ambition. It was a shark tank in the sky. I didn't step onto the main floor immediately. The chairman's private access granted me entry through the VIP mezzanine, a shadowed balcony that overlooked the gala. From here, the people below looked like game pieces on a board I was about to flip over. It took me less than 10 seconds to find Caleb. He wasn't stuck in a corner listening to boring speeches from industry veterans, as he had claimed. He was standing near the center of the room, holding a scotch, his posture relaxed and open. And he wasn't alone. Vanessa Cole was clinging to his arm like a decorative accessory. I recognized her instantly. Vanessa was an external consultant, a broker known for aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. She was everything I wasn't: loud, flashy, and desperate for attention. She was wearing a red dress that was less of a garment and more of a solicitation. I stood in the shadows, watching my husband. He threw his head back and laughed at something she whispered, a full, chest-deep laugh I hadn't heard in 3 years. He didn't look bored. He looked alive. He looked like a man who was exactly where he wanted to be, with exactly who he wanted to be with. They looked like a power couple. They moved with a synchronized arrogance, clinking glasses, scanning the room together. They weren't just flirting. They were conspiring. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down at the screen. A text from husband. Miss you, babe. Just boring speeches and old guys talking about interest rates, eating appetizers and thinking of you. Don't wait up. I felt a cold smile cut across my face. I looked back down at the floor. I watched Caleb slide his phone back into his pocket, immediately turning his attention back to Vanessa, who was now running a hand down his lapel. The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just lying to me, he was constructing an entire alternate reality and expecting me to live in it. He sent that text to the boring wife he thought was safe at home, folding his laundry and waiting for his return. He wanted the credit for missing me without the inconvenience of actually being with me. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was managing his assets. But as I watched him toast to his own deception, I realized he had made a critical error. He assumed I was blind just because I had been quiet. I slipped my phone into my pocket. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I smoothed the front of my tuxedo jacket and turned toward the stairs leading down to the green room. The time for observation was over. It was time to introduce myself. The green room was soundproofed, a vacuum of silence hidden behind the chaotic noise of the gala. It was where the real decisions happened, away from the champagne and the pretending. Arthur Sterling was standing by the window, swirling a glass of sparkling water. He didn't look like a man enjoying a party. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield. When I walked in, he turned. His eyes swept over the black tuxedo, the sharp lines, the lack of apology in my stance. "You look dangerous, Harper," he said. It was the highest compliment he could give. "I feel efficient, Arthur," I replied, walking to the heavy oak table that dominated the room. "You said on the phone there was a complication with the acquisition deal." Arthur set his glass down. The pleasantries evaporated instantly. "It's the external consultants," he said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "The Cole Group. They're pushing hard for us to sign the restructuring contract tonight. They claim our current internal processes are obsolete and stagnant." I froze. Stagnant. Caleb's favorite word. Arthur continued, pacing slightly. "The problem isn't their pitch, it's their data. They have projected figures for Q4 that haven't been released to the board yet. They have granular details on our personnel costs and project timelines. They have an inside track." "A leak," I said, the word tasting like metal. "A significant one," Arthur confirmed. "Someone at the project management level is feeding them proprietary information. They're using our own data to manipulate the price of the contract. It's corporate espionage, Harper," wrapped in a smile and a short skirt. The pieces clicked together in my mind with the terrifying precision of a bear trap snapping shut. Caleb was a project manager. Vanessa Cole was the external consultant. It wasn't just an affair. That would have been banal. That would have just been a betrayal of me. This was bigger. Caleb was trading company secrets to Vanessa to help her close a deal, likely in exchange for her affection or perhaps a cut of her commission. He was selling out the very company that paid his mortgage to impress a woman who saw him as nothing more than a useful idiot. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a liability. My marriage wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was a security breach. I looked at Arthur. He was watching me closely, perhaps wondering if I knew who the leak was. I didn't flinch. I didn't give him a hint of the personal wreckage burning behind my eyes. "Do you know who the consultant is?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Vanessa Cole," Arthur said. "She's on the floor right now. She's expecting me to sign the deal at the chairman's table in 10 minutes. "She's expecting you," I corrected him. Arthur smiled. "A shark, recognizing another shark. Technically, the new vice president of strategic acquisitions has final veto power over all external vendors." "That's you, Harper." He gestured toward the door. "Do you want me to handle the introduction, or do you want to handle the veto?" I buttoned my jacket. I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt the cold, absolute satisfaction of an auditor finally finding the missing decimal point that proved the fraud. "I'll handle it," I said, turning toward the exit. "I have a few questions about their data sources." Arthur nodded and opened the door for me. The noise of the party rushed back in, loud and oblivious. I stepped out, not as a wife walking toward her husband, but as a boss walking toward a termination meeting. The main floor of the Sky Garden was a sensory assault. Waiters maneuvered trays of caviar through clusters of suits, and the low hum of deals being made buzzed beneath the music. I walked through the crowd, unnoticed. To them, I was just another executive in a tuxedo, another silhouette in the blue light. The bar wasn't my destination. I headed straight for the chairman's table. It was located in a raised alcove near the window, separated from the main floor by a half wall of privacy glass and shrouded in shadow. It was designed for observation, not participation. Arthur took his seat at the head of the table. I sat to his right, in the chair reserved for his second in command. From this angle, hidden by the dim lighting and the glass partition, I was invisible to anyone approaching from the front. I didn't have to wait long. Caleb and Vanessa approached the table like they were walking down a red carpet. Vanessa led the way, her red dress a slash of violence against the cool tones of the room. Caleb walked a step behind her, playing the role of the loyal insider, the company man vouching for the vendor. They stopped at the edge of the table, focusing entirely on Arthur. They didn't even glance at the shadowed figure sitting quietly next to him. To them, I was just an assistant, a secretary, furniture. "Mr. Sterling," Vanessa purred, extending a hand that Arthur didn't shake. She retracted it smoothly, unfazed. "Thank you for seeing us. As I mentioned in my email, time is of the essence." "Is it?" Arthur asked, his voice neutral. "Absolutely," Vanessa continued, leaning forward to display confidence and cleavage. "My firm has analyzed your operational data. Frankly, Arthur, your current internal leadership is outdated. You're hemorrhaging efficiency. My team can restructure your entire supply chain by Q1. Caleb stepped forward, nodding eagerly. He looked like a golden retriever, hoping for a treat. "She's right, Arthur. I've seen the projections. We need fresh blood. The current management style is stagnant." There it was again. Stagnant. He used the same word to describe his boss that he used to describe his wife. It was his go-to insult for anyone who didn't constantly validate his need for excitement. "Stagnant," Arthur repeated, tasting the word. "That's a serious accusation, Caleb. You're saying your own department heads are incompetent? I'm saying they're safe," Caleb said, mistaking Arthur's interest for agreement. "And safe doesn't win in this market. Vanessa offers bold solutions. We need to stop being so afraid of risk." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the table. The dramatic irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. He was standing there, selling out his team, selling out his integrity, and insulting the very stability that paid his salary, all to impress a woman who was using him as a can opener to get to the vault. He had no idea the axe was already swinging. He was smiling, confident, arrogant. He thought he was closing the deal of his life. Arthur leaned back in his chair, casting a glance sideways at me. "Well," Arthur said, "that is a compelling argument. But I don't make these granular decisions anymore. I've delegated that authority." Vanessa frowned, confused. "Delegated? To whom?" "To my new vice president of strategic acquisitions," Arthur said. "She has final veto power on all new vendor contracts." Caleb's smile faltered slightly. "She? I didn't know we hired a new VP." "We did," Arthur said. "She's been evaluating our internal assets for months, and she's sitting right here." Arthur turned to me. I leaned forward. The light from the table lamp hit my face. "Hello, Caleb," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash, right before the screaming starts. Caleb's face didn't just pale. It disintegrated. The color drained from his skin so fast it looked like a magic trick. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, just a dry, clicking noise in the back of his throat. He looked at me, then at the chairman, then back at me, his brain frantically trying to reconcile the boring wife he left at home with the executive sitting in the seat of power. Vanessa was the first to recover, though barely. She looked between us, her smirk cracking like cheap plaster. I'm confused. Caleb, isn't this your wife?" "She is," I said, my voice steady and cool. "But right now, Vanessa, I'm not his wife. I'm the vice president of strategic acquisitions. And you are standing in my light. Caleb finally found his voice. It was a strangled, high-pitched thing. Harper? What are you? Why are you wearing that? Arthur, there's been a mistake. She doesn't work here. I'm not the one who is confused, Caleb, I said, standing up slowly. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my drink. I spoke with the clinical detachment of a surgeon pronouncing a time of death. You were right about one thing tonight, I continued, locking eyes with him. You told me earlier that I wouldn't understand the industry talk. You were worried I'd be bored by the details. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Well, here are the details, I said, picking up the dossier Arthur had placed on the table. I understand that you shared proprietary Q4 project data with an external vendor before it was released to the board. I understand that you violated your non-disclosure agreement to help Miss Cole undercut our internal team. And I understand that in the corporate world, we don't call that bold. We call it cause for immediate termination. Vanessa stepped back, her eyes darting to the security guards moving toward the table. I didn't know, she stammered, pointing a manicured finger at Caleb. He told me he had authorization. He said the data was cleared. I watched Caleb turn on her instantly. The charm vanished, replaced by a snarling, panicked viciousness. You asked for it, Caleb snapped at her. You said you couldn't close the deal without the numbers. Arthur, listen to me. She manipulated me. I was trying to help the company. I watched him with a fascination that bordered on scientific. I was seeing it in real time. The narcissistic discard cycle. For years, I had been the object of his devaluation. He had made me feel small so he could feel big. Now that he was cornered, he was doing the exact same thing to Vanessa. He didn't love her. He didn't even like her. She was just another prop in his theater. And now that the stage was burning, he was tossing her into the fire to save himself. He wasn't sorry. He was just terrified of the consequences. Enough, I said. The word cut through his panic like a blade. I turned to Vanessa. Miss Cole, as the new VP, I am exercising my veto power. Your proposal is denied. Your firm is blacklisted from all future bidding. Security will escort you out. Vanessa didn't argue. She fled, the click of her heels sounding like gunfire as she retreated. That left Caleb. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet, switching tactics instantly. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, wheedling look he used to use when he overdrew our checking account. Harper, he whispered, reaching for my hand. Babe, please. We can fix this. I did it for us. I wanted to get the promotion so we could have more. I pulled my hand away as if he were contagious. Don't, I said. You didn't do this for us. You did this because you needed an audience and I stopped clapping. Please, he begged, tears actually spilling now. Don't ruin my career. I'm your husband. I looked at the man I had spent 8 years building up, the man whose ego I had polished until I could see my own reflection in it. I saw nothing there but a stranger in a cheap suit. You're not my husband right now, Caleb, I said, signaling the head of security. You're a security risk. And you're trespassing. I sat back down and turned to Arthur. I believe we're done here. 2 guards stepped forward. Caleb started to shout my name, but I didn't look back. I picked up my glass of sparkling water and took a sip. It was cold, clean, and tasted exactly like victory.